Hi, everyone. My name is Perry Weber, and I'll be presenting on behalf of Team 24, and we're going to dive into Starbucks Coffee Company today. I'm going to go through these first slides pretty quickly so I can go and spend more time into our final analysis for the company. Starbucks was founded in 1971. This is their first location in Seattle, Washington. They, of course, are specializing in beverages, and they also have several of their brands that they have acquired, such as Evolution Fresh, La Boulange Bakery, Ethos Water, and Divana. They're operating in 84 markets with 17,000 company-operated stores and 17 licensed stores. They have some very aggressive growth plans. They're planning on adding 55,000 stores by 2030. We combine the political and economic trends here. One thing we want to mention is that the EU recently approved a corporate sustainability reporting directive, which is going to be a lot more reporting on corporations for their social responsibility. And a potential threat to the coffee industry is also going to be the increasing cost of raw materials and labor. As far as social cultural trends, there is an overall pro-union view across the United States right now, and there is a huge labor increase in labor costs and employees demanding higher pays. As far as technological trends, a lot of companies had to invest a significant amount of money on improving their technology with offering different ways to order online or mobile order and pay. This is an example of Starbucks' mobile order and pay, which of course they track everything on here and they offer specialized deals based on your purchase history, make assumptions based on purchasing times and volume. Legal trends, there is supposed to be a huge coffee shortage this year due to a low harvest in Brazil and Indonesia. There's a concern around water, and coffee production is supposed to decrease by 50%. So pretty significant. There's also concern around legislation with human rights due diligence. Of course, Starbucks sources their beans globally, and although they don't own the exact coffee farms, there is concern around the conditions of these farms. Okay, now we're going to the Porter's Five Forces. We're going to touch very quickly on these. And the bargaining power of the buyers is very high. You can switch at any time for a lengthy wait, a higher price, etc. The bargaining power of suppliers, we thought this was pretty low. So in general, it's a good thing to work for Starbucks. They do really great things for the brand. We outlined three categories that were pretty significant for the company. So as far as milk goes, their largest supplier is Dairy Farmers of America. Coffee beans, of course, it's going to be at risk of natural disasters and crop shortages across the whole industry. And then real estate, a lot of the Starbucks coffee company is controlled by Regus, which is a real estate trust group. Holding a Starbucks coffee company is an anchor in their industry, so it's supposed to be really good if you have a Starbucks in your strip mall. And so overall, it's really good for Regus, though. A threat of new entrants. There's always new coffee suppliers and coffee chains coming up. But in general, we felt this was pretty low because Starbucks has some pretty strong followers. Threats of substitutes. This was a high for the company, for Starbucks. There is lots of substitutes: coffee, black tea, matcha, and energy drinks. They counteract this by trying to provide a warm environment for their customers. Lots of inter-firm rivalry. I'm going to go into this a lot more here, but you can see a lot of the same brand, a lot of different coffee shops within a block of each other. So McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, and you advertise even $1 coffee within, miles from Starbucks. Here are three of the largest of their competitors that we have outlined here. We have McDonald's, Costa Coffee, and Tim Hortons, with McDonald's and Tim Hortons focused on low cost and speed, with Costa Coffee focusing on differentiation. This is their stock analysis here with Starbucks in green. market overlap. I mentioned this already, but McDonald's is a little bit different where they focus more on food service, and the other brands are much heavier focus on the beverage industry. As far as performance goes, McDonald's is expected in 2022 to reduce its costs, and they're looking to drop their cost by 50%, which is pretty significant, and reinvest 40% of these funds into restaurant expansion. So they're looking to add 1,700 stores globally. And Costa Coffee is focused on more structural changes. So they're looking at acquiring more brands and doing more licensing deals and mitigating risk within the company. Resource similarity, Starbucks is expanding successfully through differentiation. They're looking more at focusing on their brand and focusing more on their positive experience versus McDonald's is focusing on more affordability and convenience, which is the same with Tim Hortons. And Costa Coffee is looking at more of expanding more into the US. Out of these brands, which one thing was interesting is Tim Hortons is looking at specifically targeting Texas and California, with acquiring more like licensing partners to branch out in these states. Something to consider is that Starbucks has a larger margin operating income, so they have a really high operating income. And that despite all the growth of the companies, they all are taking on debt. So Starbucks has a debt of 15 billion, McDonald's 30, almost 37 billion, Costa Coffee 1 billion, Tim Hortons is at 13.6 billion. Okay, so now is the fun part. So we're going to go into our final analysis and recommendations of the balance, and this is our balance scorecard that we recommend. So we broke ours into 3 primary categories: employee, business, and customer. And the reason we did this is because any 3 of these categories, if any of them were dropped or ignored, would significantly impact the company. They all really work in tandem together. So with all of our research, we identified the biggest issues that that we felt were in these 3 buckets. And then we identified the key problem, objectives, and metrics. So I'll go into those now. The key problem that we addressed in as far as the employees go, which at Starbucks they call them partners, is the rising labor cost. The objective here is to reduce barista turnover, which is going to be analyzed by store turnover percentage, meaning that we want a very low store turnover. And the next one would be retain the existing talent within the stores. We want the store manager stability to be high. So we want there to be 100% would be the ultimate goal, but we want store managers to stay within their existing stores. As far as business goes, the key problem we identified here is increased product and distribution expense. So we want to really the objective here is to reduce food and product waste within the stores. So something we had thought about is that the pastry case, if it's stocked full, that food has to go somewhere in the day. So if it's thrown away or donated, we really want to reduce whatever amount of food waste that is going on within the store. As far as customers go, a key problem we identified is the pressure from competitors on price and speed. Our objective here is to attract new customers. We want to analyze this by the key metric here is store growth percentage. So we want our stores to be growing. And the next objective is increase customer satisfaction. The key metric is going to be a customer satisfaction survey percentage, meaning we want to track this by having a survey at every location where it is tracked, and we want to be able to analyze how the customers are feeling about that particular location, and we want to make sure there's a plan in place to improve the store experience. Okay, so our final analysis and our problem identification, overall on all of the key issues we identified, we really felt that rising labor costs was the most significant problem. And that is solely based on the numbers that we analyzed on their reported figures. There was just a huge increase in labor as a cost. And these are just some numbers that we had put on here of how much it had increased. One thing we wanted to point out is that labor isn't just one bucket, and we have a picture here on the next one, but there's a lot that goes into labor, and we really want to get Starbucks out of crisis mode and help plan to mitigate these costs. Another thing we wanted to identify is that we can't just take out healthcare, right? We have to make sure that these are looked at in an appropriate way, especially if you're trying to retain employees. It might be better to look at something like overtime where you you can control that a little bit better without impacting the store experience or the employees, the feeling of being cared for. So we want to make sure we can control the right labor bucket. Our final analysis and recommendation is that we combined PTO and sick time, and combining these two is going to provide the employees with greater flexibility, and it's going to also reduce costs associated with them leaving. Employee retention, we recommend that the recruiting and training costs to hire. Well, one thing we identified was that the cost to replacing employees is very high. So it can cost employers 33% of an employer's annual salary. So it makes more sense to really invest in the employees that are existing. As far as placing orders, there's multiple ways of ordering: online apps, self kiosk. We want to really reduce the cost associated with guest services and cashiers. These are specific figures that we've identified. So as far as a key metric for total turnover, our target value is 10% decline in shift supervisor turnover and 20% decline in overall turnover. Store manager stability is we want a 1-year store manager stability at 92%, 2-year store manager stability at 42%, which means that store managers that have been there for over 2 years, 42% of the whole portfolio should be at that. They should have a store manager within place for 42% of their portfolio. Food waste, we want 100% use of the food to pull app in stores. This was specifically recommending that we came with the idea of having an app that would identify specifically what that particular store needs to use for food at specific time periods. And so we wanted to have an app where employees could use, and we want 100% usage. We want less than a 7% overall food waste in stores, so less than 7% of their food should be thrown away at the end of the day. Store growth, we are looking for a 15% improvement on mobile order pay. So that's going to come from marketing primarily, but we also want stores to be focused on helping push mobile order pays. And then customer satisfaction, we're looking at 90% of stores rating it highly satisfied. Starbucks, as far as an implementation plan, we're looking at, they have regions, divisions, and then districts, and we're looking at having all the divisions align with their shared vision, and then kind of going downward from there. Some potential issues that might arise is they can continue, labor issues can continue to obviously exist. Even after all the recommendations that we've identified. So there could be some staff turnover if you focus on reducing overtime. It could still impact them. To mitigate this effect, we want to increase their working conditions. And and overall, one other thing that we had mentioned is another way we could have alarms set for if employees work overtime, it can help them with these overtime amounts and make sure that they don't stay on the clock when there's overtime. And lastly, to incentivize the performance, an increase in wages could be rewarded. Um, and as far as instead of just increasing wages, we could say you have a closer parking spot or preferred hours. We don't have to just increase wages. And overall, our recommendations are to focus on these labor metrics that we have identified and our balanced scorecard. And I hope that you guys enjoyed our presentation on Starbucks, and we look forward to seeing your feedback.